For centuries, the elders of the Zithari Council had watched the galaxy carefully. They were old beyond memory, their minds sharp as star crystals, and their voices full of wisdom carried over millennia. Time and again, they warned the other species, "Beware the humans." But the warnings fell on deaf ears, dismissed as ancient paranoia or exaggerated tales. Humans were new to the galactic stage, barely a blink in the cosmos. Their home, a blue planet called Earth, seemed fragile and small. Their technology was primitive compared to the established interstellar powers, and their society was chaotic, full of constant conflict and strange emotions. What threat could such a young species really pose? The Zithari remembered the ancient messages sent by their scouts, reports of a species that survived impossible odds, that adapted with fierce intelligence and relentless will. But other races, comfortable in their long peace and complex politics, ignored these signs. They laughed at the elders' warnings, calling humans reckless, wild, and unworthy of respect. Among the humans, no one knew about these warnings. Earth's own leaders were too busy fighting amongst themselves, distracted by petty struggles and greed. Humans looked outward only in fits and starts, sending probes and small crews beyond their solar system. They believed themselves alone, masters of a small corner of space. That ignorance was their greatest weakness. When the first human ship arrived at the galactic meeting place, a colossal space station orbiting a neutral star, many delegates greeted them with curiosity and condescension. The humans were led by Captain Mara Jensen, a fierce woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She walked with the confidence of someone who had faced death too many times and refused to bow. The initial talks were formal but cold. The humans wanted allies, trade, and recognition. The council offered polite smiles, but no real trust. The elders watched carefully, seeing more beneath the surface. Humans were unpredictable. They didn't play the political games or follow the subtle codes of diplomacy. One elder, known as Velari, voiced what many felt, but would not say aloud. They are too dangerous because they are so unshackled by tradition or fear. They will fight, adapt, and never surrender. If ignored, they will become unstoppable. Velari's warnings were met with skepticism. The other species preferred to focus on their own power struggles and alliances. They underestimated the humans' tenacity. But the humans were already changing the balance of power. Within months, human engineers reverse-engineered alien technologies with a speed no one expected. Their soldiers adapted alien weapons and tactics, mixing them with their own brutal instincts. Humans formed alliances with fringe groups, species cast out or ignored by the main factions, building a force that was messy but terrifyingly effective. Captain Mara and her crew pushed deeper into uncharted space, uncovering threats that the galaxy had long ignored. And when the ancient enemy, the Draxkar, returned from their dark exile, it was the humans who stood ready to fight. The elders had warned, but the galaxy had not listened. Now, as the first shots of war echoed across the stars, the galaxy would learn the truth. Humans were not just survivors. They were a force born to conquer, to endure, and to reshape the future, whether anyone liked it or not. The Draxkar had once been a nightmare whispered about in legends, shadowy creatures born from the darkest corners of the galaxy, hungry for destruction and chaos. For centuries they were thought defeated, locked away by a fragile truce and powerful ancient technology. But with the rise of the humans, the fragile balance began to crumble. Captain Mara Jensen felt it in her bones before the official warnings came through. Her crew aboard the starship Vigilant had intercepted strange signals and unexplained disappearances near the edges of explored space. Satellites malfunctioned, colonies went dark, and no one could explain why. But Mara knew the signs. She'd seen too much to doubt what was coming. She stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the swirling colors of a distant nebula. Around her, her crew prepared silently, the weight of their mission settling in. "We're not just explorers anymore," she said quietly. "We're the first line of defense." Back at the Galactic Council, the elders' voices grew urgent. Valari and her peers pleaded for unity, calling for all species to put aside their rivalries and prepare for the Draxcar return. But centuries of distrust and complacency made their calls fall like drops in an endless void. The humans, however, did not wait for permission or support. They mobilized their fleets with fierce determination, forging alliances wherever they could, even with former enemies. To Mara, survival was simple: adapt fast, strike first, and never back down. The first battle came on the shattered moons of Tira 7. The Draxcar descended like a black storm, their monstrous forms tearing through defenses that had stood unchallenged for generations. Other races faltered, caught off guard and unprepared. But the humans fought differently. Their tactics were unpredictable, brutal, and terrifyingly effective. Mara's forces used guerrilla strikes, traps, and relentless assaults, pushing the enemy back inch by inch. Where others fled, humans stood their ground. In the chaos, Valari watched from the council chambers, her ancient eyes heavy with both hope and sorrow. The humans, wild and reckless, were exactly what the galaxy needed, and exactly what it feared most. As the war escalated, old alliances shattered and new powers rose. The humans became legends in their own right, feared not only by the enemy, but by the very races that had ignored the Elders' warnings for so long. And through it all, Captain Mara Jensen kept moving forward, knowing that the fate of the galaxy rested on a blade's edge, and that no one could afford to underestimate the human spirit again. As the battles raged on, the true cost of the war began to reveal itself. Entire worlds lay in ruins, their skies darkened by smoke and ash. Refugees poured into the galactic cities, desperate and broken. The political tensions that had long simmered between the species now erupted into bitter conflict as blame was thrown like fire. Many leaders accused the humans of stirring chaos, of pushing the galaxy too far, too fast. They claimed the humans were reckless, dangerous, and driven by blind aggression. Some whispered that the humans were no better than the Draxcar themselves, a violent plague spreading destruction in their wake. Captain Mara heard these accusations but refused to answer. She knew the truth was more complicated. Humans were neither heroes nor villains. They were survivors, forged by hardship and endless struggle. The galaxy had ignored warnings, and now it was paying the price. Behind the scenes, the Elders struggled to maintain order. Valari met secretly with Mara aboard the Vigilant, a rare moment of alliance between ancient wisdom and raw human will. "You carry the burden we all feared," Valari said softly, her voice like wind through the stars. "But you also carry hope. If you fail, we all fail." Mara nodded, feeling the weight settle on her shoulders. "Then we won't fail. Not while I breathe." Together, they planned new strategies, combining Elders' knowledge of ancient technologies with human innovation. They crafted weapons and defenses that could turn the tide, but the cost was high. Every victory demanded sacrifice. In the midst of war, a fragile unity began to form. Humans, once outsiders, became the glue holding fractured alliances together. Their unpredictability forced others to rethink old prejudices and fears. But not everyone welcomed this change. Shadowy factions within the council plotted to undermine the humans, fearing their rising power would threaten centuries of control. Sabotage and betrayal lurked in the dark corners of the galaxy. Captain Mara had no illusions. The war was not just against the Draxcar, but also against those who wanted to see humans destroyed, by the enemy's hand or by their so-called allies. The galaxy was at a crossroads, and the next move would decide everything. The tension inside the Galactic Council's chambers was thick enough to cut with a blade. Behind the polished halls and glowing orbs of light, old rivalries whispered and roared louder than the distant gunfire outside. The humans had become more than a problem to be ignored. They were a threat to the balance of power, a wild card that unsettled centuries of careful control. Mara knew the truth. The war was as much political as it was brutal. Some council members had never wanted peace. They thrived on chaos, manipulating conflicts to keep themselves in power. To them, the humans were a dangerous force, too bold, too fast, too unpredictable. The sabotage had started quietly, disrupted supply lines, false intelligence, mysterious accidents. Mara's ships were being targeted not just by the Draxcar, but from within. The humans fought on two fronts, a battle for survival and a shadow war of betrayal. One night, deep in the corridors of the Vigilant, Mara confronted a trusted officer caught passing secrets to an unknown faction. The betrayal cut deep, but Mara's resolve hardened. "Trust is earned with blood," she said coldly, "and betrayal stains the soul forever." Her leadership became ruthless but fair, pushing her crew to the limits, but inspiring fierce loyalty. Her soldiers knew that the only way to survive was to fight smarter and harder than ever before. Meanwhile, Valari worked tirelessly in the council, trying to hold fragile alliances together. Her voice grew stronger, demanding unity and action, but old wounds ran deep. Some species refused to follow humans, seeing them as reckless invaders rather than saviors. But others began to see what Valari and Mara already knew. Humans were the future, whether they liked it or not. As the Draxcar pushed their dark invasion deeper into the galaxy, the cracks in the old order widened. The war was no longer just about defense. It was a chance to reshape everything. For Mara and the humans, the fight had only just begun. The war was no longer a distant conflict fought in shadowy border worlds. It had arrived at the heart of the galaxy. The Draxcar unleashed their fury on once peaceful planets, tearing through defenses with savage force. Cities that had stood for thousands of years crumbled under their assault. The screams of millions echoed through the void, a grim reminder of what was at stake. Captain Mara Jensen stood on the command deck of the Vigilant, her gaze fixed on the swirling holographic map of battle zones. Red markers flashed like warnings, each representing a world under siege or lost to the darkness. Her crew moved swiftly, coordinating strikes and rescues, but the tide was brutal and unrelenting. "This isn't just a war for territory," Mara said, her voice steady but filled with fire. "It's a war for the soul of the galaxy." Her words sparked a determination that ran through her crew like electricity. Humans and allied species worked side by side, united by the urgency of survival. But even with unity, the losses piled up. Friends, comrades, and innocent lives vanished in the endless storm of war. Amid this chaos, the humans began to reveal their true strength, their fierce adaptability. When the Draxcar attacked with overwhelming numbers, humans countered with clever tactics born from centuries of survival on a harsh, unpredictable world. They used guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run strikes, and traps that confounded the enemy. Where other species fought with tradition, humans fought with raw instinct and ruthless innovation. Mara herself led daring missions behind enemy lines, disrupting supply routes and rescuing captured allies. Her reputation grew, not as a polished diplomat, but as a warrior willing to do whatever it took. Stories spread across the galaxy of the human captain who never backed down, who faced monsters without fear. But the cost was heavy. Mara lost many close friends, soldiers who had become family. Each loss cut deeper, hardening her resolve, but also weighing on her spirit. The war was shaping her into something both feared and respected. Meanwhile, Valari continued her work in the Council, pushing for greater support for the humans. She faced resistance from traditionalists who saw humans as a threat to their power. Secret meetings and betrayals threatened to undermine the fragile alliances that held the galaxy together. Yet Valari believed in the humans. She saw in them a force unlike any other, a force that could end the cycle of fear and complacency. "They are wild, yes," she said in one council meeting, "but that wildness is our salvation. Without it, we fall." Her words slowly gained support. Species once skeptical began to provide aid, resources, weapons, and soldiers willing to fight alongside humans. The tide began to turn, but the war was far from over. Deep in the shadows, the enemies within plotted. Those who feared the rise of humans conspired to sabotage efforts, feeding false intelligence to the Draxcar or delaying crucial reinforcements. Mara knew this betrayal could destroy everything they fought for. One night, during a critical mission, Mara's ship was ambushed not by the Draxcar, but by forces disguised as allies. The attack was brutal, forcing Mara to make impossible choices. Her quick thinking saved her crew, but the betrayal shook her deeply. In the quiet moments after the battle, Mara stood alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The galaxy was changing, torn apart by war and suspicion. But she also saw something else, a flicker of hope, a chance to build something new from the ashes. The humans had proven they were more than survivors. They were a force born from struggle, ready to fight not just for themselves, but for the entire galaxy. But to win, they had to overcome enemies both outside and within. The next phase of the war would test everything Mara and her allies had built. It would demand sacrifice, courage, and trust. A trust that was fragile but necessary. Because if the galaxy was to survive, it had to believe in the wild, untamed strength of humanity. The uneasy alliance between humans and the older galactic races was holding, for now. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered like a storm ready to break. Captain Mara Jensen knew this better than anyone. The war was not just against the Draxcar outside, it was also a battle against distrust, old grudges, and the fear of change. In the corridors of the Vigilant, Mara gathered her closest officers. The faces around her were tired, marked by loss and endless struggle, but their eyes burned with determination. "We've fought hard," Mara began, "but we're fighting on borrowed time. The Draxcar are regrouping, and our enemies within won't stop until we're broken." Her voice carried weight. They all knew the truth. The Council's political games, the secret betrayals, they were as deadly as any alien attack. Lieutenant Corrin, a sharp-minded strategist from a distant star system, spoke up. "We need to root out the traitors. But more than that, we need to build trust. If the Council fractures now, everything falls apart." Mara nodded. "Agreed. But trust isn't given. It's earned. And we'll earn it on the battlefield." Outside, the war intensified. The Draxcar had learned from their defeats and changed tactics. Their assaults became more savage, targeting supply lines and communication networks. Entire fleets vanished without a trace, swallowed by darkness. Despite the growing dangers, the humans pushed forward with relentless energy. They developed new weapons, hybrid technology blending human ingenuity with alien science. Mara led a strike force deep into enemy territory to destroy a key Draxcar command center, a mission many thought impossible. The operation was a success, but it came at a high cost. Half her team didn't return. The loss was a heavy blow, yet it galvanized the survivors. They were reminded that victory demanded sacrifice. Back on the Council station, Valari faced mounting pressure. Traditionalists accused her of favoritism, of letting humans dominate the war effort. Secret meetings whispered of a coup to remove her from power. But Valari refused to back down. We stand at a crossroads, she declared in a tense council session. Either we embrace the change humanity brings, or we watch the galaxy fall to ruin. Her words found an unexpected ally in a young diplomat from the Zorathian species who had long admired the human spirit. Together, Velari and the diplomat worked to strengthen the fragile alliance, seeking to bridge the divide between old and new. Slowly, others joined their cause, but the traitors were still out there, sabotaging efforts and leaking information to the enemy. Mara's suspicions grew, and she vowed to find them before they could do more damage. One night, a trusted communications officer was caught trying to send encrypted messages to unknown recipients. When confronted, he revealed a shocking truth. A secret faction within the council was working to undermine the war effort, believing that humans' rise threatened their control. Mara realized the war was bigger than she imagined. It wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a struggle for the soul of the galaxy. The stakes had never been higher. With new resolve, Mara planned a daring strike on the traitors' stronghold within the council station. It was a dangerous mission, filled with uncertainty and peril. As the Vigilant prepared to depart, Mara looked to her crew. We fight not just for our worlds, but for the future we want to build. We fight for trust, for hope, and for a galaxy that finally wakes up to what it means to survive. The engines hummed to life. The ship surged forward, carrying with it the weight of countless lives, and the chance to change everything. The Vigilant slipped through the shadows of the massive council station like a ghost, its sleek frame designed for stealth and speed. Captain Mara Jensen stood at the helm, every muscle tense, every sense alert. This mission wasn't just another battle against the Draxcar, it was a fight within, a strike against the invisible enemy threatening to tear the fragile alliance apart. The traitors had dug deep into the Council's heart, manipulating systems, sowing chaos, and selling secrets. If Mara failed to stop them, the war effort would collapse, and the galaxy would fall into darkness. Her team was small but skilled, veterans who had survived countless battles and learned to trust one another in the face of death. Among them was Lieutenant Corin, the strategist whose sharp mind had uncovered much of the sabotage, and Captain Rylus, a Zorathian warrior known for fierce loyalty. "Ready for infiltration," Corin reported, fingers flying over the controls. Mara nodded. "We move fast, strike hard, and leave no doubt." The council station loomed ahead, a sprawling labyrinth of corridors, chambers, and secret vaults. Security was tight, but Mara's crew had the advantage of surprise. Their goal was clear: find the faction's leaders, shut down their operations, and restore order. Inside the station, shadows moved like whispers. Mara's team navigated silent passageways, disabling alarms and avoiding patrols. The tension was suffocating, but each step brought them closer to the traitor's core. Then, without warning, the lights flickered and alarms blared. The traitors had been expecting them. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the steel halls. Mara's team fought back with precision and fury. Blaster bolts streaked through the air, and bodies fell in the fierce firefight. Mara's heart pounded, but she stayed focused. She led her crew forward, pushing deeper into the enemy's lair. Finally, they reached a hidden chamber, a war room filled with holographic maps and encrypted data terminals. Here, the traitors' leaders gathered, surprised but defiant. Velari's warning echoed in Mara's mind. Trust is earned with blood. The battle intensified. Mara faced the faction's commander, a cunning diplomat who had betrayed everything for power. Their fight was brutal, a clash of wills as much as weapons. With a final surge, Mara overpowered the traitor, securing the data that revealed the full extent of the conspiracy. The coup was crushed, but the cost was high. Several of Mara's team lay wounded or dead. As the chaos settled, the council broadcasted news of the traitor's defeat. For the first time in months, hope flickered across the galaxy. The Alliance, though fragile, had survived internal collapse. Back on the Vigilant, Mara allowed herself a moment of relief, but she knew the war was far from over. The Draxcar still threatened everything they had fought for. The galaxy's future hung in the balance, not just between light and darkness, but between trust and betrayal. Mara looked out at the stars beyond the viewport, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. "We've won this battle," she whispered. "But the war is just beginning." The galaxy was holding its breath. After the crushing blow against the traitorous faction, the fragile alliance seemed stronger, if only just. The war against the Draxcar was far from over, but the tide was beginning to turn. Captain Mara Jensen and her crew aboard the Vigilant prepared for what could be the final battle, knowing that everything they had fought for now depended on it. The Draxcar had gathered their forces for a devastating assault on the Council Station itself, the symbol of unity and hope. Losing it would mean chaos, collapse, and darkness spreading through the stars. The Council called for every available ship, every soldier ready to stand and fight. Mara stood on the bridge, her eyes locked on the approaching enemy fleet. The sky was a swirling tempest of warships and dread, black shadows creeping toward the heart of the galaxy. The humans and their allies were outnumbered, but not outmatched. "We fight for every world, every life," Mara said, voice steady despite the storm outside. "This is our stand." The battle erupted in a furious clash of light and sound. Explosions rocked the station, beams of energy tearing through shields and hulls. Mara's fleet wove through the chaos, striking at key targets, pushing back against the darkness. The humans fought with a savage grace, adapting to the enemy's moves like living weapons. Mara led from the front, her every decision driving her crew to feats of courage and sacrifice. The losses were brutal, ships destroyed, friends lost. But the spirit of humanity burned bright. In the midst of the battle, a critical moment came. The Draxcar unleashed a massive weapon designed to cripple the Council Station's defenses, a pulse that could shatter shields and leave them exposed. Mara made a choice. Leading a small strike team, she raced toward the weapon's source, knowing it was a near-suicide mission. The Vigilant slipped past enemy lines, evading fire and weaving through debris. Inside the enemy stronghold, Mara and her team fought their way to the weapon's core. The battle was fierce, each second counting against the clock. With grim determination, Mara planted explosives and triggered them just as enemy reinforcements closed in. The explosion rocked the stronghold, destroying the weapon and sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. The Council Station's shields flickered back to life, and the Allied fleets pressed their advantage. The Draxcar retreated, their forces broken but not defeated. As the stars settled into uneasy calm, Mara returned to the Vigilant, battered but unbroken. The cost had been high, but the war had reached a turning point. In the council chambers, Valari addressed the gathered species. Her voice was filled with cautious hope. "We have faced darkness and betrayal, but we stood together. The humans proved what we feared and hoped, that their wild spirit is our greatest strength." For the first time, the galaxy truly saw humanity not as a threat, but as a savior. Old grudges began to fade, replaced by a fragile but growing trust. Mara looked out at the stars once more, knowing the fight was far from over. The Draxcar would return, and new challenges would arise. But humanity had carved its place among the stars, not as victims or outsiders, but as warriors, survivors, and the unexpected hope of the galaxy. The elders warned. Mara thought quietly. And now the galaxy finally believes it's time to fight for the future, together. And with that, the Vigilant surged forward into the vast unknown, ready for whatever came next.